What's up, y'all? TBrown31 here with JaboctheGreat once again. We are back with another episode of the Last Word Podcast. And today we got some NBA stuff to get into. Last time we made an episode, we were covering games 1 through 3 of the NBA Finals. Of course, the finals are now over. They ended last Monday with the Celtics getting their 18th championship. Most in NBA history. They've surpassed the Lakers once again. So the Celtics had an interesting series against the Mavs. They came out and started 3-0. That's when we did our last video. And then the Mavs in that next game, that same night, they ended up winning game 4, 122-84. Had a huge game in Dallas. Yeah, it really wasn't. I was a little surprised about the score, but I said it during the video. Like it's very likely that even though the series is over, I think Dallas will win game 4. Convincingly, and then Boston will turn around and win game 5. That's exactly what happened. So, overall takeaway from this series, something we were saying, we both picked the Celtics. We didn't expect the Celtics to, mostly destroy them here, but Celtics, they were clearly the better team. That they've been, you can criticize their opponents throughout the playoffs, but they've been the best team in the playoffs. And something I said in that last video was Mavs were, looking like the best team, against the Thunder, against the Grizzlies, even at some points against the Clippers and in that first round series. But Celtics still were the best team. They had a lot of depth in the series. Even with Porzingis, he came in early, missed some time later in the series with, re-aggravating an injury. Like Celtics, they were just too deep for him. And you really would have needed a Herculean effort from the Mavericks. Basically what they had in game 4, you would have needed that pretty much every single game. Obviously they wouldn't have beaten Boston by 40 points every game if they were to win this series, but that type of effort on both ends of the ball, both sides of the court, that's what you would have needed from the Mavericks in this series for them to win. Celtics, they're just clearly a better team. Jason Tatum, I didn't realize this when we look at the box score, like he actually ended up leading. He led the entire playoffs, points, rebounds, assists, but he ended up leading the finals too. Like it didn't look like that when you were watching the games, right? We were talking about Jason Tatum's poor shooting efforts in those first few games, but he played pretty well in the last part of the series there. Especially with 31 points in game 5 to close it out. But I would still say, Jaylen Brown definitely deserved Finals MVP, and like he deserved Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Hopefully, this will get him a lot more credit than he had been getting. But Jason Tatum, despite a poor shooting stretch early on, he was still a great all-around player for Boston in the series. And I will say, we'll get to free agency later in this video, but I'm really interested to see like how they're able to keep this team together and if they're able to run it back next year.
Yeah, I think this finals is kind of a tale of two different teams for sure. Right, the Mavericks just weren't built for just handling a team as deep as the Celtics. Right, we talked about it after those 3 games. It would take so much effort from the entire Mavs, at least starting 5, and for sure some of their bench guys too, to be able to overcome the Celtics 4 out of 7 times, possible 7 times. And then in game 4, you get like the perfect fluke game, right? Fluke game, not fluke game. 122 to 84 is just like, yeah, that's not happening. That's not
Right.
That's not normal. Like, we're not going to turn around in game 5. And as a matter of fact, you might make it worse for yourself because you just smack them in the head out of nowhere in game 4, and now they're going to come back and hit you. And that's what happens, right? They come back and in game 5, and the Mavericks are kind of back to normal. You get 28 out of Luka, but you don't get much more than anything out of anybody other than Kyrie and Josh Green out of nowhere. And the Celtics lock back in. Tatum puts up his highest points total in the playoffs or in the finals so far. Jaylen Brown gets 21. Holiday and Derek White play well. It's over. It's they win by 20. They close out the finals at home. Perfect scenario for them. The 40-point loss in game 4 essentially means nothing. Just doesn't really get much going on for them.
Right.
And so it is just kind of like, dang, like the Celtics team is just really stacked. There's not much that, Sure, they played weaker opponents in the East on their way there. They played injured opponents. Um, their conference finals opponent was also a team that went through injured opponents and then became the injured opponent, right? And they had injuries to KP all playoffs, but it really didn't matter. He came out in games 1 and 2 and did what he had to do, and then he, took his rest and sat back and got a ring. Not that he didn't do anything in the regular season to help get them there either. Right? He's a big part of that team. But it is going to be interesting to see what they do with this team. They're almost all under contract as we move forward, at least for another year or so. But you do have Drew Holiday, who's getting older. You got Al Horford, who's I'm sure now looking at retirement now that he got himself a ring.
Yeah.
So we'll see kind of how all that goes. The Mavericks are a team that I think could maybe retool a little bit and become a Western Conference star again. I do feel like this one just a tough opponent to end up having to get for the finals when you do get through the West, right? Because the Nuggets go down, you take the Timberwolves down, the Lakers and Warriors aren't really a big part of it this year. You get this golden opportunity to get to the West. You take out the 1 seed as well in the Thunder, and then you get to the East and it just can't get there. And then next year, I'm sure the Nuggets will be a little stronger. The Timberwolves will be a little more experienced. The Grizzlies will have John Morant back, assumably. So it's going to be a little tougher. Dallas might have thrown a little opportunity out the window, but they are a good young team. They just need to get stuff going. We talked about Tim Hardaway Jr. Funny enough, in Game 4, he came in like Steph Curry in one quarter and just rocketed himself to 15 points out of nowhere, hit a bunch of threes, and that was it. That was Tim Hardaway's finals contribution. So this is I'm not going to say it was a bad finals. The Celtics just kind of showed us what they showed us throughout the whole playoffs. They were the best team in the league, and they handled business no matter who the big star on the other side was. Kyrie and Luka didn't really pose that much of a threat to the Celtics throughout that entire run, which is really, really impressive.
Yeah, with the West, you were saying it like, hey, the East had pretty much every single team in the East, had somebody injured within their like, top 2, top 3 players, right? The West, for the most part, like didn't really have that problem. Not Kyrie, Kawhi. For the Clippers, he was injured, but like for the most part, West was good, and they did have that golden opportunity. Lakers were out in the first round. No, Nuggets in the conference finals. Even though Timberwolves were still really good. No Warriors, of course. They didn't have to play Kawhi again. In that first round. So Mavs did have a golden opportunity, and for the most part, the West is clearly better than the East this year. It's just that one East team in the Celtics that were just that good. So it is unfortunate, if they had matched up against someone else in the finals, maybe it'd be a different story. But maybe this specific Celtics team are really just that good. And the Mavs are a young team. That's true. You would expect them to get better, but it is again about opportunities. And this may have been one of their better opportunities over the next few years, depending on how things shape up. With free agency, of course. If Kyrie, I don't expect Kyrie to go anywhere. I know people are going to make a huge deal out of that. I don't expect Kyrie to leave. But when we get to free agency in a bit, we'll Kyrie's not a free agent, but we'll talk about those kind of situations. But I will want to move to my team, the Lakers, real quick here with our head coaching search. Of course, Darvin Ham was fired after getting eliminated in the first round. A lot of speculation. Dan Hurley, they got an offer over to him, coach at UConn. We were talking about this after he won the championship. Like, he's not going to leave UConn. That's not gonna happen. Even for the Lakers, and when you look at just the dollar amount, like it's a good offer, but like if you rank it, he wouldn't be he'd be like number 6 as far as highest paid coaches. So when you put it in that kind of context, I see why he wouldn't want to leave. I think it would take a whole lot for him to leave that situation that he's in. But we do end up hiring LeBron's podcast buddy, also known as JJ Redick, former NBA player, about 15-year veteran. He it's funny. I feel like people kind of forget about JJ Redick. His most notoriety was really at Duke, being in that long list of hated white guys over there. But JJ Redick's definitely a really smart guy. I mean, we've seen that on TV, especially with like First Take. He runs circles around some of the guys on there. Um, as far as being a head coach, though, I don't know. Like, I think we've had, young coaches. I mean, it's not like he's the first coach in this kind of age range to be a coach or anything, but it is interesting to see like somebody that's LeBron's age, basically, now being the head coach of that operation, specifically after they just had a podcast together, which I'm assuming they're not going to do anymore, right? You would think, like, I don't think it'd be a good look for them to do podcast episodes together after games. I mean, I know Draymond does his podcast, and literally after games, you know, Paul George, only a lot of guys have podcasts, but I don't know if it'd be the best thing for a coach to have on with his star player, presumably if LeBron stays. But yeah, I mean, I considering the options, I mean, I like the hire. I just don't know. Like, I'm not gonna be swayed too much one way or the other until things really start to get into the season. And I'm really more concerned about what the front office is going to do more than JJ Redick, to be honest with you. But I mean, what are your opinions on that one? And then what are your opinions with Monty Williams, getting fired by Detroit?
Those are definitely the two biggest coaching things going right now. I mean, Darvin Ham fired is obviously like the precipice to the JJ Redick hiring. Ham goes over back to Milwaukee to be an assistant coach. Last time he was there, they got a championship, so I'll try to be optimistic about him coming back. But
Yeah.
just stick with JJ. He's a really smart guy. Clearly displayed on the podcast with LeBron that, I mean, he knows basketball. He knows how to orchestrate plays. He's very intelligent about the way to run a basketball team. I just think it's kind of weird to have him coaching like LeBron or coaching AD, and I don't know. If Monty Williams was fired and JJ took over the Pistons, that is just like probably the worst job you could take right now. But I would be like, well, he's young, but he's not as young as they are, and so there's an opportunity there for him to provide some wisdom. With the Lakers, I don't think he'll do horrible. I mean, I think he'll do all right. But it just feels like one of those hires. It's like, wow, like it's like you sent me the post where they edited like LeBron and JJ standing on the court together, one in uniform and one in like coach attire, and I was just like, and you're like, this dude's really a coach. Like he's really gonna be controlling the entire team, and it does feel it's gonna be weird to watch a Lakers game, especially in the first few weeks next season, and see JJ on the court side, walking around and shouting at LeBron James or anything like that. So I don't think it's a horrible hire. I think he's a smart guy. I think he can be a good coach. I think it's a tough hire for your first head coaching job in the NBA, to have to take over a team with LeBron, your podcast buddy, a team with such high expectations as the Lakers. Right? We saw Frank Vogel get a championship, have a down year right after, out of there. It was, gone. So they let Darvin Ham stay for a little bit. Didn't work out too well. And in that way, the way that Darvin Ham ran that team, I do think that JJ has like a stepping stone up to a higher bar, right? Like Darvin Ham, not a horrible coach, but sometimes the Lakers just complete failure to make a judgment. Everyone talks about the standing on the side with his hands in his pockets. JJ could probably easily do a little better than that and set the bar higher for himself. But it's tough. It's going to be tough for him, I think, to make a good name as a coach for himself, taking over that particular team. But we'll see. And speaking of keeping your coaching name high, like you said, Monty Williams is fired by the Pistons. They just paid him a massive 6-year contract last year, $78.5 million over 6 years, an unprecedented sports contract, as many articles noted. Then he went like 13 and whatever the other number would be there. They won less games in the regular season than the Celtics won in the playoffs, which is a stat that I saw that I was like, that's not real. And I looked it up and I was like, that's real. That's Celtics got to win 16 games to get the championship. They did that. Pistons only won 13 games. And so on one hand, I think you can't hire a guy for $78 million over 6 years and get him out after 1 year. On the other hand, the Pistons roster is not that bad. Like it's not as bad as they were last season. Their inability to close games, the fact that they went on like a 30-game losing streak because they couldn't close games. I mean, they're up 20 on the Celtics at one point. They lost that game. People keep posting how good were the 2023 Pistons as a joke to show when they were up 20 on the Celtics, and it's a good joke, but they still lost that game. And so it's just like, yeah, maybe he's just not the guy. Maybe he's not getting the players involved. We know he had issues with DeAndre Ayton over in Phoenix. Him and Dominating couldn't get it going together. So I don't know if I haven't heard anything about any beef with the players. I know he said he was brought to tears when they won their first game after that 30-game losing streak. They also started the season like 3-1, something like that. I mean, it was like, yeah, okay, Monty's got this young squad ready to play basketball, and then they lost everything. So obviously you got some injuries here and there. I would personally say that the best way, I think that there's no real reason to hire a coach unless you give them 2 years, unless it's an interim coach, right? But obviously a 6-year, $80 million contract is not an interim coach, right? Give Monty 1 more year to try to do something, see if he can, make another good draft pick, and then work with the team from there and try to retool it. But 1 year, they still owe him, almost $80 million. And now they got to look for another coach to take over this team that just can't get it together. It's a really weird move. I think the Pistons are definitely in bottom of the league purgatory for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Stephen A. He said it. He's like, Monty Williams should have been praying, or thanking God or whatever, that they ended up firing him. It's like, and he was not speaking from the perspective of the money. Like he was just saying, to no longer be coaching the Pistons. It's like, true, the organization is bad. You said that team should have been better than what it was. I mean, it was a bad team, but they shouldn't have lost like 30 straight games. They're not like that bad of a team, you know. Like there have been few teams in NBA history like that have really been worthy of being that type of team to lose 30 straight. Like they could have done better. But that is it hasn't been a great organization over like the last really 15 years ever since we've been kids. But at the same time, like the dude got such a big payout. Like if he gotten like maybe 10 million or something, whatever. But like with that kind of payout, like I wouldn't be sitting there complaining. I know guys probably don't like to get fired. They don't want to. They don't want to have the headline saying, "Hey, Monty Williams has been fired." That even if I got paid a lot of money, like that would hurt my ego. That would hurt my pride as a basketball coach, as a competitor. But come on, dog. Like they like the Pistons took more of the brunt there. I mean, considering how much they had to pay him, like they made the mistake of giving him a huge contract like that in the first place. And I thought I thought the Suns, they probably shouldn't have let go of him in the first place. But giving him that kind of contract, like that's their own fault. So I think both sides, they kind of just took it on the chin there. In this separation, I'm sure Monty Williams, he'll get some kind of job. I'm not sure if he'll get a job immediately, but he'll definitely end up somewhere. I expect him to be coaching, sometime soon again. If it's not a head coaching job, definitely at some kind of assistant job somewhere. So Monty is a free agent. We do want to get into some free agents that we have coming up, and this seems like this is going to be one of those years where free agency, assuming that a lot of these guys are actually going to be on the move, is going to be a pretty big deal. I don't know if it's going to be super reminiscent of 2019 where we had like KD, Kyrie, West, Paul George, I mean Kawhi, everybody, like literally everyone that year. But we got some big names. One of the bigger names on this list, I guess, to kind of start, sort of doesn't count. Tyrese Maxey's a restricted free agent. Like I don't think Tyrese is going anywhere. So not really going to count him here. But besides that, some of these biggest names, LeBron, DeMar DeRozan, PG-13, Pascal, he's staying in Indiana, but right now he's still a free agent. You got Miles Bridges down in Charlotte, D'Lo with the Lakers as well, Klay Thompson, your boy Tobias Harris, James Harden. I mean, you got some names, OG Anunoby here. I mean, you've got some names on here that can make some big strides. Russell Westbrook. Like you've got names on this list that like they can make an absolute difference. And whenever LeBron James, of course, is a free agent with that player option that he loves so much, that's going to be the biggest story in going into the offseason. I told you before this video started, like I don't think he'll leave, and I don't think he'll, drag this thing out too long. Um, he has the option, obviously. LeBron's smart, just in case he didn't want to do something, but I think he'll just, get a lesser contract and then he'll stay in LA. Like I don't anticipate LeBron really going anywhere at this point. And something else I mentioned, Rich Paul made some comments about Bronny not being a package deal with LeBron. That's interesting. Um, I guess that's kind of putting it out in the air. You're like, hey, like don't draft Bronny to expect LeBron to go there. But I mean, that's not really going to help Bronny's draft stock if you're saying that. Like he is his own man, yes, but that was a huge part of him possibly getting drafted to a certain team. So with that, I think LeBron is probably going to stay. You know, I think Paul George. I don't think Paul George is going to go anywhere. And even though that Paul George Kawhi tandem in LA as well, like hasn't been going as well as it should have been. I mean, the two of them have only both been healthy in one out of like 5 playoffs since they've been together, and that's when they blew that 3-1 lead to Denver. I don't anticipate Paul George moving anywhere, but I do think the Clippers are gonna have to try to figure something out. And maybe you can blame that first round exit on Kawhi's injury again, but I mean, still, they could have won that series. So maybe the Clippers make some move, and again, Russell Westbrook's also going to be an unrestricted free agent. James Harden is going to be an unrestricted free agent. So they've got things they can do. So that's just some of the ones in the West. Outside of like Klay Thompson, he's one as well. Or is Klay going to move on? Are they going to finally break up the Splash Brothers? I don't think so. I think Klay will just probably do sort of like LeBron, come back on a smaller deal. But those are some of the ones in the West. Like, which ones in the East are you kind of looking at?
Yeah, well, obviously, if we're looking at the free agents, one of the kind of crazy ones to think about that he's already a free agent is Tyrese Maxey, but he's a restricted free agent. He averaged
Yeah.
26 for the Sixers last year. He's staying. I think there's no shot that gets broken up. DeMar DeRozan is the interesting thing to me here. Unrestricted free agent. Had a great year, despite his age and everything, and playing with a Bulls team that is not super great. Averaged 24 and 4 and 5. I'm not really sure what DeMar wants to do because I'm not sure what the Bulls want to do. They just made the trade. They swapped Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey. Um, they lost. I was no picks given, so they sent 2-time All Defensive guy for a young guy who kind of shriveled up in the playoffs. Regardless of off court stuff going on with Giddey, I think just the player swap there, a 1-for-1, is bad. Clearly, the Bulls need more playmaking, but I don't really like that move. So now I don't know what DeMar's going to do. We just saw him at the Kendrick Lamar concert, so maybe he's trying to get out back to the West, West Coast guy. Anyway, but I don't know. He's a big forward that I think some other teams in the East might need. One team in the East that is definitely going to be looking for a forward is the Sixers. I don't think that Tobias Harris is going to stay. I don't think the Sixers want Tobias Harris to stay. 17 points per game in the regular season, 17, 6, and 3 in the regular season is pretty solid. And then in the playoffs, Tobias was not to be found, and that has been kind of common for the past few years. He's 31, so maybe the Sixers try to pull in DeMar DeRozan. I haven't heard any kind of buzz about that. They wanted to pull Paul George. I know that. I just heard that might be falling through. So I'm not sure what the Sixers are going to be doing there, but I think that Tobias Harris, I don't know where he's going to go, who's going to want him. Great regular season piece, but I don't think he's going to be a Sixer anymore. Team in the East is not looking for a forward. Would be the Pacers. Pascal Siakam seems to be re-signing, so that's going to be good for them. They got him in that big offseason trade, and one of the risky things about it was that he was immediately going to be a free agent. So people were worried,
Right.
does he get here and decide, nah, this wasn't really a fit? But he stays, and it works out for the Pacers. Yep, Miles Bridges is going to be a free agent. He's obviously got a lot of stuff going on with him, but he had some buzz last year on the trade deadline. Wasn't able to make much move. So a lot of big fours at the in the East, kind of moving around. Emmanuel Quickly, a part of a deal to the Raptors last year, now going to be a free agent. That's an interesting one to me for an Eastern Conference guy. I feel like he may stay with the Raptors. I think he enjoyed being there. But at the same time, also, I don't know if any of the Raptors players want to stay with the Raptors right now. They had a rough year last year. They couldn't kind of get things to stay. But they got a good coach. He's trying to keep things together, so maybe quickly will stay. He's a restricted free agent though, so I don't think he'll have much choice if the Raptors decide to match him. But you could get a team that might price the Raptors out. I don't think that would be much of a consideration though. Other big guys in the East, I'd say Kelly Oubre should stay. I don't know what his plans are. I haven't heard much about him, but I think the Sixers have an answer to the Tobias Harris gap in their on their team. Right, Tobias Kelly Oubre gave you 16, 5, and about 2 off the bench last year, backing up Tobias Harris. I think if you can't get anybody to pull in a big name, you just keep Kelly Oubre and let him start. Not a bad guy. Had some rough injuries last year. Some of them inflicted by civilians. But for the most part, he had a pretty good season. OG Anunoby, I think the Knicks need to keep him. He's an unrestricted free agent, so the Knicks need to do whatever they can to hold him down. And he brought a great culture to that team, defensively and everything. So I think that's pretty good. And kind of from there, I think there's not much like massive, but he healed for the Sixers. Felt like a pickup that they really, really needed when they got him. And then he just didn't really add that much. I mean, he gave you 12, 3, and 3 on a pretty small contract, but I just don't think that's what they really wanted out of him. And when the playoffs came, he didn't give you a whole lot. My Bucks have got a few free agents going around, right? Malik Beasley could be possibly on the move. I liked the addition of him last year, but in the playoffs, he chucked up way too many shots. I would not hate to keep him on like a vet minimum and let him still bring some of that like shooting and kind of wisdom, so to say, to our team. But I do think he needs a little bit of a lesser role. Other big free agents for us are Pat Bev and DeAndre. Pat Bev is a big one for us. I think that I would. I can't believe to say this, but I would like to keep him. Before Pat Bev was on my team, I was not a Pat Bev fan. And having him on the team is really nice. He has a lot of what we had when we had PJ Tucker on that big run. So I'd be happy to keep him. Other guy I was thinking of, I couldn't get the name in my head. Jay Crowder. Liked him when we picked him up. He hasn't really brought much to the team. He kind of comes in every now and then, hits a 3 or so, but his defense hasn't really been there. And then the last Bucks free agent I can think of is Danilo Gallinari. Also not really wanting to keep him. So I don't know. I think the West has a lot going on. There's a lot of big names. Obviously, LeBron James will jump right out at you. Paul George, and you got D'Lo and Clay and all that. But the East has got some big ones too. I think it's going to be kind of a lot of power forwards moving around in the East this offseason. So excited to see where people go. Excited to start getting more reports about what people want to do. Some people I think should really stay. Some people I think would probably benefit from moving. And I guess one last thing that I just remembered in the West, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, one of the only 2 people in the 2020s to have 2 rings aside from Drew Holiday, I think has said that he is going to test his unrestricted free agency. So could end up just staying with the Nuggets and trying to run it back with them again. Well, not run it back to back, but like trying to get another championship with them. Or we could see a guy who's got 2 rings in the past 4 years try to go somewhere else and get another one. So I think that'll be interesting to watch. Not a super huge player, but I mean, pretty good on offense, pretty good on defense. Got 2 rings. It'll be interesting to see where he goes. And he was not minor in either of those two rings either. He was pretty good for both the Lakers and the Nuggets.